doctoral student and postdoctoral research fellow, Monique. And our chair today was supposed to be Daisy, but unfortunately she's not feeling well, so Judith is going to be doing the chairing. So I hand over to Judith for introduce our presenter.
Thank you very much, Kura. So our speaker will speak for about 30 minutes. Thereafter, the discussant has approximately 10 minutes to respond. In the last 20 minutes, will be left for question and answer. Let me introduce our speaker for today as well as the discussant. Our speaker is Dr. Monique Kwachou, as Kura is already alluded to. Dr. Monique Kwachou is a Cameroonian writer, youth worker, researcher, and practitioner of gender and education for development. Monique's work, research, and practice generally involves the theory and application of African feminist thought, critical pedagogy, and youth advocacy in the improvement of education quality or outcomes for the addressing of social injustice and towards sustainable development. Monique has over close to a decade of academic and practitioner experience gleaned from working with a range of employers, from higher education institutions to civil society organizations and international development agencies. She is currently employed as a research associate at the University of Bristol, working on the ERC-funded AFRIUNI project. So Dr. Monique's presentation today is the creative lives of African universities, the UNIYAO case. And our discussant is Fanidh Sanogo, who is a doctoral research fellow under the HUMA Institute for Humanities in Africa, University of Cape Town, South Africa. Without much ado, over to you, Dr. Monique.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, everybody. It's lovely to be in that room again, even by proxy. So let me share my screen now and get to it. So we have as Judith has said, I'm Monique Kwachou. The last time I gave a brown bag talk was when I was running on my PhD in 2020. So it's been a while, but it's great to be here again. Like I said, I want to be clear that as I begin, what my goals are for this presentation. So Prof. Walker always tells us, like, you need to make your goals your goals well known, so you don't ramble. So I want to make it clear that with this presentation, I am coming as an alumnus and as a friend of the group. And I'm just sharing my ongoing and still incomplete research, which I would like your opinion on from you as friends and colleagues, as former supervisors. And I would like you to simply take away an understanding of what I have been up to in my current research and what role my current research, what my current role entails, as well as the directions we are taking with this. Okay, so without further ado, let me see. I don't know why this isn't moving anymore, but I am going to be presenting on my section of the Creative Lives of African Universities project and how I shaped this section of the project and what we have been finding out so far. So the AFRIUNI project is one that is very interesting to me. When I saw the call for the research associate position, I was curious as to why such a research was being done under the Department of French, under the Humanities, because we're coming from a development studies and education background that does higher education from the center. So I wonder, like, okay, so why are we doing this under Department of French? But I've come to learn a lot about the humanities in the course of the last year. And I can argue that considering that universities are sites of shaping who we are, shaping the way our people think, is the making of the elites of any country. It is in that place that you start to see cultural preservation, knowledge change, and a lot of socio-political shaping for the nation. So with this project, considering the fact that the angle we're going for is there's a dearth of literature on francophone higher education in particular, and considering the fact that a lot of the state universities in francophone African countries were established by France, we want to see how or to what extent these institutions have become uniquely francophone African, not just French. And what is being taught here, what's being learned here, how culture is being preserved or changed over time. So that is what the AFRIUNI project is about. We're looking at how the university is creatively constructed and how it creatively constructs knowledge and it constructs the people within this ecosystem, this knowledge ecosystem. So I'm going to give you some spotlight on the University of Yaoundé one in particular. This university is the pioneer university in Cameroon. And for that reason, it has a lot to do, a lot on its shoulders, actually, historically. It could be considered if Cameroon can be considered a melting pot, University of Yaoundé one can be considered the melting pot furnace, so to speak. Sorry, this kept skipping for some reason. And this university has a very eclectic base. Right now, it's still the largest university with 45,000 to 60,000 students, served by about 800 to 1,000 teachers, many of whom hold administrative posts at the same time. The university therefore had the mission of this sociocultural mission of harmonizing the country, because for a long time it was the only one that existed. And so people were coming from all over, very diverse backgrounds. Now, as a research associate, this is what I was charged with upon joining the AFRIUNI project. The PI has already solicited funding. She has laid down the goals and objectives and what could be our possible outcomes, outputs, like the book, number of publications, so on and so forth. And so coming on board at that time, it's very different from doing a doctoral research and even like the postdoc experience in SA, whereas you were the PI on your own project. Now you had to fit yourself in this project, but yet make it yours. So I want to say it was very illuminating experience, because I was at one point like, is this even mine? And that's your boss. You're no longer, it's not like somebody's helping you supervise. That's actually your boss. But Prof. Ruth has been very actually accommodating and encouraging that we should make it ours. So you see the A1, A2, A3 objectives and strands she outlined in the initial research proposal to the ERC. Then coming on board to make this research mine, to make this research contextualized to the Cameroonian case, I had to redo like all the strands, fine-tune the strands, not redo, fine-tune them to the University of Yaoundé one case. So what was, let's say, the first strand of documenting and analyzing cultural representations on selected African universities. In the case of Cameroon, I fine-tuned that to exploring the nature of sociocultural representations and reproduction on the University of Yaoundé one campus, particularly capturing the potential and challenge of multilingual culture. Mind you, we are doing this research, AFRIUNI project is across 4 Francophone African countries, Benin, Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, and Cameroon. But the Cameroonian case is the only one that is officially bilingual. All the universities are operating within multilingual cities. For example, the University of Cheikh Anta Diop in Senegal is operating within a city where Wolof is the main language. However, it's not the official language of the university, as in the case of University of Yaoundé 1, where it is English and French are the official languages, as in teachers can teach in English or French, depending on whichever is their primary language. And students can write exams in either language. They will receive the questions. They're supposed to receive the questions in English and French, and then choose how to respond, what language to respond in. Okay, let's move forward. Further fine-tuning of the research. Coming from the objectives, which I had fine-tuned, which you saw above, I had to develop my individual research questions for this case. Because when she was putting in the research proposal, obviously she has to have general research questions, general aims and strands that the research might follow. But for each case study, that research aim and objective is interpreted differently. So questions that I am asking will be similar to questions that are being asked in Senegal, but not the same. Like they will generate similar information, but not the same. I'll get to that in future. I just want to show you like how I worked through this, contextualizing it. And next, again, this is the thinking process and how this was. I know there's a lot of text, so I'll just give you a few minutes. But I just want to show you how the thinking process, my thinking process went through the course of the last year. You saw me move from the research objectives, which she had outlined in the research proposal before we came on board. Move from there to contextualizing the aims of the research for the University of Yaoundé 1 case. You saw me move from that to developing research questions for that case. So I wanted to link how the questions that I'm asking for this case to the methods I'll be using. And we had to have similar methods, not the same, but similar. So all of us are doing a form of participatory action research. All of us are doing a form of surveying. All of us are doing a form of interviewing. And obviously literature review. And again, our outputs have to be similar to complement one another and to enable for analysis, to enable how can I put it? To enable comparison across the different case studies. So you'll see how these questions will be answered on the second line, how I'm going to answer them, either by the engaged social cartography or a PAR course. One of the methods I'm using was a participation action research course with students from a select faculty. And then how I'm going to present, how the output is going to be presented. Either that is a documentary film coming out, or a book chapter, or creative nonfiction work with the students, anthology with the students. So let me give you like an overview of the strategy. So for the specific research strategy of University of Yaoundé 1, this is it. We're doing an ethnographic action research. It has, we're using engaged social cartography, which is mapping of the university. Basically, that means I engaged the students during the participatory action research course, which ran for 12 weeks, to map, draw and make an outline. The university does not have an official map, so the students co-constructed a map of the university. Places that were safe, places that were not, places that they felt like, okay, I belonged here because of this and this and this reason. So it was kind of like an interactive activity, mapping of their campus. And I did walking interviews to be able to help alumni recollect their experiences, and staff as well. Walking interviews and photo interviews of the past decades of the university. University of Yaoundé 1 will be 60 years next year. So we also had agreed upon what kind of theoretical lenses we'll be using. We have similar but not the same. In my case, I'm using African feminist adaptations of Freer and Bordeaux and Stuart Halls, as well as Etienne Bebenjo and a Cameroonian philosopher. So yeah, we're at this stage going into analysis. Again, I just want to be clear that although we are different, we have some commonalities. We have some commonalities across us. All of us are using some form of chronology to do a timeline of the progression, the historical progression of each of our case studies, each of our universities. We're all using some form of participatory action research. We're all using interview guides, a similar interview guide, but not in the same way. Like I did interview walks. Prof. Ruth just sat down with her participants. We are all doing restitution events that's giving back to the communities in one way or the other. So we have exhibitions on campus and students are engaged they opted for what will benefit them. Or we ask them what will benefit them and then we go that way. So what has been done so far? This has been the timeline. We have so far already gotten research permit, presentation of the strategy to collaborators. And so we are currently at analysis. This is what has been done already. We have done mass surveying, collected all the primary data, So at this point, I just want to share the fact that the research is still ongoing, but what I have been observing, what the outtakes have been so far. And they have been diverse, honestly, because it's not only like the findings, let me put it that way, it's been the experience in all. For one, the major thing is doing research on the humanities is different, very different from the education and development studies background that I came for. And I wrote a blog about it that I can share in the chat. I say different, not like better, not like more difficult, but it just required a lot of unlearning from me. From the development studies background, I come in saying what's the problem and how am I going to solve it? In the case of the humanities, I am constantly being told, do not come in with your preconceived ideas that this is a problem, and come in and observe. And it's okay if all you did was observe and write that down. And from somebody that is an overthinker and tends to want to like plan everything out, that was a bit of a problem for me, but I'm working on it. It's also been very interesting to see like how unabridged they are and what can count as outputs and what can count as having influenced or having made a knowledge contribution. You did not have to solve the problem. You don't. It made me question what I would say or what I have come to see as intellectual saviorism. You know, the way we say white saviorism. That is, I think a lot of us are coming from the development studies background with an intellectual saviorism that we have to come and fix somebody or fix somebody's problem. So the humanities this time the humanities has helped me question that. Another outtake that I'm getting is, prior to this research, I had worked on my PhD, which involved participatory action research in terms of how can I put it? Analysis. I co-analyzed data for my PhD with students, and I did theoretical or methodological partnership, as in adapting the capabilities approach with African feminist thought. But I had not reached this third level of decolonizing, which I'm seeing now, where the funds themselves, the research direction, the research strategies, and the power of the students, like they constructed the power course that I am talking about. The participatory action research course was something that we came up together, sat down, made the modules. What class are we going? What topic are we going to study this week, that week? How is exam going to look like? How is the final presentation going to look like? So on and so forth. They came up with that. So I saw different levels of decolonizing with this research. Another outtake has been basically the differences between higher education's sociocultural mission and their higher education's ability to realize it. And I think this comes out with a lot of our research in education, that the promise, the potential for education is hardly ever really met. But in the case of this research, I want to go beyond that to identifying the inhibitors of the realization of that potential and what needs to be done to bridge the gap. I am, for this reason, for analysis, I'll get back to this, sorry. I'll get back to this one. Sorry, I just want to show you, for this reason, regarding the differences between the potential and reality, I am using a operationalization of Maxine Moino's practical gender needs and strategic gender needs, but rather it will be practical education needs or education aspirations and strategic education aspirations. And if you know the differentiation between the two, it shows, how to call it? It shows that there's a difference between what one needs to overcome systemic oppression and what one desires. So is this tool that I'm using for analysis. Now to get back to this, one of the other outtakes at this time that I am seeing is the inadequacy of traditional theories of multiculturalism for the Cameroonian context. Traditional theories of multiculturalism include the melting pot theory that speaks of assimilation and how different variety of people are often assimilate when put together, or the acculturation theory, which is known as the salad bowl theory. But in the case of Yaoundé 1, neither of this really applies. So I'm proposing that perhaps it's a different theory or likeness, which can be considered the juicer. I'm still working on this, so don't ask me what brand of juicer or how that works, but it's something I'm conceiving at this time. We have we're nearly done. Okay. Other directions that this research will be taking, or other outtakes I perceive we'll be probably writing on, will be things like sexually transmitted marks, which has come up in the course of the research so far. The quality assurance boards that we have, quality assurance boards that we have with the university. This includes the university's consultative committee for promotions, and then the regional one, which is called CAMES, Conseil Africain de Magache. And sorry, I don't know why this thing keeps moving. And then there is the Francophobia and Francophilia on French campuses, because we have students that are, they want to become the Frenchmen, the assimilation is still there. And then we have those that are on the completely different end of the spectrum. We're looking at also the perspectives of studying humanities in a developing country and what people's ideas of humanities are. Of course, teaching capabilities for teaching in a multicultural context also is something that we'll probably develop. Okay, so this is, I want to pause here. This is what I would consider the first whiff of outputs. Remember I said social cartography, engaged social cartography is one of the methods I use. And we collaboratively with the student co-researchers constructed this map, what is safe, and we're analyzing this map, the map of the campus, the student spaces that they have, where classes are held. So students came up with this map, basically. We used, which graph? I've forgotten the Adobe. I think we used Adobe to come up with this over the course of 1 week out of the participation action research course. So you can see this will be enlarged and placed on campus as a campus map that can help new students coming in around the gates. So this is one of the ways we're giving back to the university. That is the students giving back, actually, because it's their intellectual work. All right, that is the end of the presentation. I think I've kept the time. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Monique. You're just on time. I can hand over to you.
Oh, okay, I can stop sharing.
Our discussing Fanidh, you can offer your reflections.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Monique, for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. And I think that it's such a, sorry, I kind of lost my camera. It's such an exciting project because you don't usually, like, you have philosophers like philosophizing about the state of higher universities and higher education on the continent, but you don't necessarily have this kind of research. I mean, I haven't come across a lot of them, so that is very exciting, and it's really, really, really nice that you took us through your methodology and your methods too, because you often have a lot of presentations where you have people talking about the outcomes, but then we're not really sure about how they got there. So that's really, really, that was very a highlight for me in the presentation. So the reason why I'm saying that it is exciting is because the university is known to be the handmaiden of colonialization, and it's also really a site where it's a laboratory, you know, and it's really cool to turn the microscope into the object of inquiry, and yeah, just really diving into this the processes of production of knowledge that arise from there, and also the processes of production of subjectivities that arise from the university. And I think the fundamental question at heart of this project is really, what does it mean to be free? Or what does it mean to be freed? Which is also the heart of Paulo Freire's question and philosophy. So I think it's such an important project. So I really enjoyed how you just really took us through the different aims also of the project, which is really identifying the potential and challenges of multilingual cultures, with Cameroon being a very different case study as opposed to Senegal and Benin and Côte d'Ivoire. And also evaluating the faculty's epistemological processes, as well as documenting the students' lived experiences. So I think when I was going through your presentation 2 days ago, one of the things that really screamed at me, I could really hear the things that I read in the book, in Mudimbe's book, L'odeur du père, which is the scent of the father, where he really questions what it is to be a scientist in the humanities, but also this relationship we have with the West, you know, and like really debunking what it means to question these institutions and these epistemic processes of these processes of knowledge production, and really diving into our different relationships with them, not just about critiquing the West, but also critiquing the ideas that are evolving from that particular way of producing knowledge, which is kind of reproducing this way of centering the West. And so I think it's, yeah, it was fascinating for me to interact with your work in that way, especially that you are providing empirical data like on site from an African university. And when you mentioned the juicer metaphor, I was very, very curious about it, and and I laughed when you said you just coming up with it and you're not really sure. But I think it's a very beautiful metaphor, and I was wondering, like, especially thinking with Mudimbe, what what the flavors would be, and where the fruits of that juice are coming from. You know, where do they grow, and where are you getting the fruits from? Because also thinking about the university and using the university, putting the university under a microscope, I wondered whether that actually took you outside of the university itself, and really thinking about even the conceptualization of the university, what we call university, or like what we call higher education. Because yeah, just thinking with other post-colonial writers like Nazi Boni, who is Burkinabe, and also Djibril Tamsi Niane, also, who kind of really try to think of higher education as something that is outside of the university. And yeah, even thinking about like the colonial era, where you have chiefs, village chiefs, who refuse to send their kids to school. So you have a case where it's actually, at least in the case of Burkina, and I'm sure this echoes in other colonial African countries as well, where you have chiefs who refuse to send the kids to school, and you have actually slaves that end up in school and end up going to attending universities. So that really speaks to like different processes of knowledge production, and the nuances that arise from that. And yeah, and when you think about the Sanogo University also, although that was heavily Islamized, yeah, I wondered really what this thing of questioning the university, and like asking questions from the university, and putting the university under the radar, and like really reversing the gaze. I wondered which garden to really keep the metaphor of the juicing, and using fruits, like just which places that form of inquiry took you as well. And yeah, I think it's such an exciting project, and I think I'm just going to. I have other questions, but yeah, I really also enjoyed the interpretative way of inquiring, and really showing the different levels of decoloniality. I think that's really interesting because, like as I say, you have lots of philosophers that talk about higher university, but it is exciting to have a project like this where you kind of really dive into what students think and really what how faculties kind of produce knowledge and what kind of philosophies inform and ethics inform that machine of production and of reproduction also of subjectivities and ideas. Yeah, I think that's it from my end, and I will just leave space for other people to engage with the work. But I think this is an exciting project, and thank you so much, Dr. Monique, for taking us into your laboratory. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Fanidh, for responding. Over to you, Dr. Monique. Would you like to say something?
Okay. I'm going to just try and keep a response short. Thank you, Fanidh, for engaging with the work in that way. I do like I appreciate your questions and comments. To respond in general, because I don't want to go too detailed on the outtakes. Like I said, we're still in the analysis stage. But with regards to your question on what does it mean to be free and what does knowledge production mean, that is very central to aspect of this research. Remember when I said I'm using an operationalization of Maxine Molyneux's practical gender needs and strategic gender needs. Now, Molyneux's differentiation is there are needs that women have for empowerment that will be acceptable to everybody. For example, if you teach them soap making, if you teach them how better to carry water, it doesn't really contradict with their social roles as women. Strategic gender needs, however, are those needs that, when satisfied, will be able to get them to break their chains and truly be empowered, change the systemic oppression. When we were thinking of how to analyze freedom, transformative education, that came through to me. That, like, Molyneux's differentiation just became something that needed to be used. Because there is education that I received that's allowed me to read and write and be productive for the capitalist system. There is education that I have received that has allowed me to make money and take care of my family. And that is not really contradictory. The education that I have received that will allow me to question my system of oppression. The education that I receive that will enable me to break the chains and question the rector is the education that they don't want me to have. So I'm using that framework for strategic versus practical versus strategic gender education needs or education aspirations to be able to differentiate what exactly would be free. And you want to, come to find that the students just want the practical education needs, the one that will enable them to make money to free their students, to take care of their parents. That's the one that we all want. And it's normal and it's okay. We're not saying the strategic ones are better. We need both. So that's where I'm coming towards that. What does it mean to be free? And what does like knowledge production here, valuable knowledge production mean in this context? That's the angle I'm taking. With regards to the juicer, again, I am still in the works. It's really something that came up. I first presented that part at Oxford conference last year, and it's one of the things, it still came out of the literature review. Now that I've gone for field work. Because the humanities have a problem with collecting data, I have to change that statement. So the extraction of it. So I'm trying to change my wording around that. So now that I'm back from fieldwork, I do have a different perspective about, I still think it's the juicer. So yes, it's not a melting pot, it's not salad bowl. I still think the juicer allegory is best. The allusion to a juicer is best. As to what is being juiced, I would say, obviously, just like what is being melted, different cultures, different people. But with a juicer, you'll notice chaffs come out, and either the best or the worst of the juice has formed. And no two processes of juicing is the same. So whether you use the same fruits, the water might be off. The water might be off on a different day. The process of the type of fruits, no two fruits are the same. So like the pineapple might have been more acidic on this day. So the product is often different because of contextual factors that adapt. So I think that also speaks to why I'm using the juicer allegory in this instance. I don't know if that makes sense. Okay, that's just my response for what you said. Any more questions?
Thank you very much, Dr. Monique. I think we can have questions from the room and online. Yes, Dr. Edwards.
Okay, thank you very much, Monique, for the wonderful presentation. As you were presenting, I think I was reminded of a text by Adamtu Tefera. They've written something on the role of flagship universities in Africa. I don't know if you came across that for your literature review. My question is based on the title. I think I saw something on Pedagogies of Hope and Pedagogies of Despair. So based on your initial findings, what are the pointers to the pedagogies of hope? In other words, like what is the sweet side of the juicy part of your story? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Edwards. Dr. Monique, would you like to respond to one or more questions at a time?
Should I just I will respond one at a time? That'll help me because of my hearing impairment.
Okay, so you can go ahead.
Okay, so the title Creative Lives of African Universities, Pedagogies of Hope and Despair was already constructed by the PI before we came on board. But obviously we all agreed on it later on, so it's not been adapted. It is inspired by fear. Obviously, it's Pedagogies of Hope. And he outlines there his critical pedagogy in Pedagogies of Hope and what it did aside from banking learning. But we also wanted to look at what is the opposite of Pedagogies of Hope, and how do we say, or to what extent can we say these are Pedagogies of Despair? I would say, following the fieldwork, the way I'm looking at this from I don't know about the other cases, but the way I'm looking at this from the Cameroonian case is Pedagogies of Hope would be what the students, like a student learning, student and teacher learning centered education and pedagogies that are constructive towards achieving of their practical and strategic education needs. However, above all though, I'm saying that the pedagogies of despair might not necessarily be created. It might be the absence of you doing what needed to have been done. A lot of it is the lack of teacher capabilities to teach in multilingual contexts. Mind you, we have teachers that have a degree in a particular field coming into classroom and teaching what they know, but not necessarily having been equipped with the skill to teach it. You can know something but not be able to teach it. And even you can know something and not be able to teach it. Or even if you know how to teach it, you don't know how to teach it to such a vast or such a diverse group of students, of learners. And that makes it a lot more difficult. So I'm starting to see the pedagogy of despair being a lack in that pedagogical practice or pedagogical training of staff, academics in this context? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think for the learning outcomes, one of the despairs, I think you talked of sexually transmitted marks. I think that should also be a central. I think if you are to write a paper on the aspect of despair which is coming out of your research. Thank you.
Okay. In 2021, the Sex for Grades documentary by BBC dropped. And although that was in Nigeria, that documentary was done in Nigeria and Ghana. The findings there relate to a lot of experiences across African countries, at least West and Central African countries. And they just didn't have our data. So perhaps it could have been a lot worse. So as part of the participatory action research course, the students chose this as a topic to be discussed in class. And we watched the documentary together, and they discussed, they're the ones who came up with, because in Nigeria it's called Sex for Grades, in Yaoundé one is called like STMs, the way you say STDs. So they have termed it STMs, sexually transmitted marks, and spoke of, first of all, the lack of sexual harassment policy, the lack of protections for teachers and students. And so that's one of the papers I'm sure we're going to write with students. Students have already written on their some on the products, like the output from the course was some students presented their artwork being creative nonfiction or fiction pieces, where they wrote about experiences with that.
Okay, we still have 13 minutes for questions. Okay, Alia, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Monique. It's really wonderful to see how the project has progressed over time, so from the conceptual into the practical. Monique, I really respect your work, as you know, and I'm really keen to learn more about the methodologies and the way that you use them. So there's a lot of now talk about walking interviews and sort of geographies and mapping as well. And you also mentioned something about cartographies and the way you created those maps. So I was just wondering, because you're one of the very few people I know that work on decolonizing methodologies, theories and concepts as well. So I just wondered if you'd like to talk a little bit more about those methodologies and also the differences and the nuances within the literature that you would have you would have drew on in the work, and then applying that or learning from that. So I guess in a sense, in this participatory endeavor, what do you think is the nuance that you brought forward and sort of deconstruct the methods as we see them? Although within the hierarchy of methods, I think these still need to be emphasized more on. So I wanted to learn a bit more about your practical experience of that, of using these methods, drawing on the literature mostly that we see now in the global north, and sort of reforming those methods and your experiences around that.
Okay. When I was last year, when I was looking at developing the research strategy and what methods I was going to use, I was basically thinking, okay, University of Yaoundé 1 is a university in Cameroon, but not my university. I've never taught there, I never schooled there. I am more Anglophone than Francophone, and in a majority Francophone country. I would not be the best person to do the prompting for, like, you know, if you're part of the context, you will know what questions to ask about what parts of the university if you want people to recollect their experiences. of the university. So since I saw myself as an outsider relatively, I didn't want to trust myself to interviewing people one-on-one and being the one to prompt, okay, what was your experience in this classroom or of this experience, and so on and so forth. So I saw walking interviews as a way for me to discover the university through the eyes of the participant that I was interviewing. I actually got the idea of it from a photo interview project. By the way, I should credit Prof. Ruth for this because she had to deal with somebody that's coming from the development studies education background. And I was just like taking us to museums and kind of like a lot of unlearning being done. So it was during one of the museum visits at the start of the project that I actually had the idea. Because there was a photo interview project being done here with Black Britons from the Caribbeans, from the Windrush movement. And I could see how looking back on those photos of those years made them like triggered some memories for them. So that's what I thought that would be needed, especially for participants. A lot of my alumni participants were no longer in Cameroon, we're no longer in Yaoundé. And to kind of transpose them to the context, I had to bring pictures from the archives and pictures from current day campus and help them like jog their memories of your experience here. Like, do you remember this building? Do you have any experiences from here? What was your favorite part of campus? What was, let's say, the safest you ever felt on campus? Or what was your worst experience in the classroom? What was your best lesson? A lesson that you'll never forget. So to jog your memories around this, I saw the photo interview as great. And for those that I could reach, for those that were in Yaoundé, I did walking interviews with them. Now, mind you, the one thing I did learn from it was I was talking about walking interviews, being very naive. Our campuses are huge. So nobody's walking all that way. So it ended up being halfway through it, ended up being driving interviews, and we'll be like in the back of a taxi, and the Uber, they're Ubering us around while I'm doing the interviews in the back. Also, I didn't really consider the fact that if I was doing walking interviews, the population of the university, a lot of people walking around and making noise. So the transcripts would have been horrible. So it ended up being like driving interviews around, that same concept. Yes, as you mentioned, I would say this had the benefits I thought it would have, but it even had more benefits because I did not consider that people might not feel safe talking about certain things in their offices when I was interviewing the staff. So the fact that we're being driven around by somebody that is just us in the car, and my research assistant driving, so it's pretty much just us. And that kept them safe to move around and able to also kind of like make them not think they're on campus, but not on campus because you're not like within a building that you're suspecting somebody's listening in on you. So it helped for that as well.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you.
All right. Yes, Fanidh.
Monique, thanks so much for such an interesting presentation and your beautiful slides as always, and a really, really rich project. Yeah, I mean, it really, thank you. I think time's going to run out. I would have liked to know a little bit more about your participants and who they were and how they were selected. But at the risk of running out of time, I'd actually, if you respond to anything, I'd rather it was the next question, which is, I'm really intrigued by the fact that you put, you ascribed some of the challenges to the humanities. And I wondered why you think it's that particular context that has made it difficult or challenging, or yeah, the differences that you've ascribed to humanities as opposed to a different discipline, and not just to research or a decolonial approach?
It's not I was not, sorry, perhaps I was unclear. I was not saying the humanities are difficult. I was saying there's a lot of unlearning that I needed to do. Coming into the humanities with a development study, social science mindset, we are a lot closer to the pure sciences than we want to admit, I think, in the way we construct things and the way we problematize them and break them down. So coming to the humanities meant a lot of unlearning for me, because while my colleagues are like, let's think of what does this mean? And let's philosophize this. I'm like, okay, what is the answer to the question? How can I get the data out of it to actually write this paper? I don't know what you guys are rambling here on. So there was like a whole session on poetry and student poetry, and coming out of it, I'm like, this doesn't feel like science. So it was more like me, not the humanities. It was just my unlearning that needed to be done. Rather, as to studying from the humanities in the context, what we're looking at, what I meant by that is we're looking at what it means to study humanities in African context. Mind you, I think, Fanidh, you remember an article that you shared with me where one of our ministers made a comment saying that the problem with our unemployment is in Cameroon is the fact that Cameroonians are going to study things like German and Spanish and so on and so forth, instead of useful things that can help their country. So we are looking at analyzing those remarks, or we did analyze those remarks during the class, and the perceptions that Africans have of what is useful knowledge and what is garbage.
Okay, I think I can take a question. Prof. Mika.
Thanks, Judith. Thanks, Monique. I had a question about how you're dealing with conflicting worldviews and epistemologies in the operationalization of your conceptual framework, because I know you're working with various theories and theoretical frameworks. So I wondered if there's a particular way in which you're dealing with different types of conflict, particularly in relation to the worldviews and epistemologies that might not sort of match very easily across the various theories that you're drawing from.
Okay, thank you, Mika. That's actually a very good question. So what you saw 4 different adaptations there that I listed as conceptual frameworks I'll be using. I'm using those on different aspects of the project, not all of them at once. So for example, the operationalization of Molino, I'm using it for this particular aspect of student aspirations to work. So for, let's just say for every paper, or for a different output, or for a different set of data, I'll use the theoretical adaptation for that. So it's not like I'm using all of them on everything.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I can take one more question. Yes, everyone take this
Tell us about her participants. I mean, she spoke about, Monique, your participants. You spoke about graduates, and you spoke about students. You spoke about lecturers. So I'm just was interested in.
There's another group of stakeholders that's like non-academic staff, like administrative officers, people that are community members of the university that have been selling around the campus, landlords of student cities, of student hostels that know the history of the university, especially with regards to protests across the years.
And how did you bring those respective data sets together?
Well, I am bringing, so we have like 12 of, sorry, let me get this. I don't know if I can share. So we have like 12 academic staff, right? That represent 5 faculties of the university. We have 15 students from one faculty, Faculty of Arts and Humanities. We have 15 alumni, and then we have 12 community stakeholders that have belonged to the campus or the ecosystem for 7+ years. And like the survey that is surveying a campus-wide survey. So the different data sets are responding to different questions. That's why, like you saw the graph that I did, like a breakdown of the question I'm asking and what is going to respond to what. So for a paper such as the melting pot paper, where I'm looking at the theories of multiculturalism, I'm going to be probably using findings from data sets of teachers and staff, but not necessarily community stakeholders because they're not in the classroom. So yeah, different data sets are responding to different questions.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Monique, for your presentation. Thanks to Fanny for such a critical feedback. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I think we can give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
This marks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Monique, and thank you very much, Fanny, for your reflection. And thank you very much for the participants online and those who are in the room. This marks the end of our BBT presentation, and we can call it a day. Thank you so much.
Bye, Monique. Bye, everyone.
Bye.